In this 10-minute video, you will hear a fascinating history of the first Taste of Utopia event held in 1984. It was attended by over 7,000 meditators and advanced meditators, yogic flyers, from all over the world. Dr. Morris reflects on the worldwide positive effects of the first Taste of Utopia event and encourages our participation in the upcoming Taste of Utopia 2.0.
I would first like to request that everyone gives their full support for Taste of Utopia 2.0, which has the goal of creating a global creating coherence event with the goal of establishing permanent groups of global coherence creating of at least 8,000 yogic flyers in India and in many countries around the world. And they asked me if maybe I could give some recollections of the Taste of Utopia 1.0. Maharshi was in Washington, D.C. And he called, I was in Fairfield, and he called and said, could we organize that in 4 weeks from now, that at least 7,000 people will be flying together there in Fairfield? 7,000 at the time was the equivalent of the square root of 1% of the world's population. So this was the number required in order to create global coherence, global wave of peace, harmony, and positivity. And we said yes. And Maharshi said, we'll call this a sample taste of utopia, so that the world could know what a utopian world can be if there are 7,000 enlivening the unified field of natural law, the unbounded ocean of consciousness, together at the same time through the powerful technology of transcendental meditation, the TM City program, including yogic flying. So in the succeeding 4 weeks, 2 big halls were built, one of 6,000 square meters and one of 2,000 square meters. Foam was purchased and sheets to fill those huge flying halls. A Utopia Park was created, 200 mobile homes with 500 bedrooms to accommodate the guests. Beds and mattresses and pillows and sheets were purchased to accommodate about 5,000 people on the campus itself, with the remaining more than 2,000 living in the town of Fairfield. The field house, that is the gymnasium, was converted into a dining hall that could feed 5,000 people at a time. And while all that was going on, a new place for Maharshi to live was built, so he could come there. And also, the word was spread around the world that everyone should come. And 46 countries responded to create a group of more than 7,000 yogic flyers just in the lapse of 4 weeks. So soon after Maharshi arrived, it was possible to tell him that this evening in the flying halls, 7,830 people were flying together. That was the first time ever that the square root of 1% of the world's population had been achieved flying together. Maharshi heard that. He said, we're going out. So we got in the car and we drove around the campus. And I was showing him the different buildings and what we had done to accommodate all these more than 7,000 people. And this in the middle of winter, by the way. And I said, would you like to go in and see, the dining hall? And he said, no. I said, well, why are we doing this? He said it was necessary to bless the ground where first 7,000 flew together. And that probably in some very, very ancient time, some saints had lived on that particular spot. And that was what had attracted the possibility of having that to be the first place on Earth where global coherence was created. What we found out in recent years was that that was a uniquely dangerous time in the world. In fact, the world was on the brink of World War III. President Reagan at that time was making very harsh statements directed at the USSR. And also the NATO forces were planning a war game, a war practice called Able Archer, very, very large practice. And Yuri Andropov, who was the head of the Soviet Union, became completely convinced in November of 1983 that this Able Archer war game was actually a trick meant to allow the NATO forces to invade Central and Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. So he had decided, therefore, that he was going to do the same thing in the opposite direction. So the whole world was just balancing on the edge at that particular moment when Maharishi called for this cooling wave of coherence in world consciousness. And of course, as a result of that, the global Maharishi effect, 7,000 flying together, square root of 1% flying together, that danger was averted of world war. Maharishi had also asked that the scientists make predictions about what would happen when the global Maharishi effect was created by the 7,000 yogic flyers from all over the world. And they predicted and took out advertisements to publicly predict that the economy of the world would improve, that there would be a warming of relations between different nations, that crime would drop, that terrorism and war deaths would drop during that period, and that the Cold War nations, particularly the US and the Soviet Union, would become more friendly. So these predictions were lodged in advance of the 3 weeks of the assembly. And sure enough, all of those predictions came true. Even before the scientific research was done, Maharishi said he could feel the way that world consciousness was actually reacting to the power of 7,000 simultaneously stimulating and livening the universal field of nature's intelligence, the field of bliss, the field of unbounded ocean of consciousness. Having seen that the result was there and that a global taste of utopia had been achieved, Maharishi then, for the rest of his time in the world, his primary focus was to create such a group in a permanent way, not just for a few weeks, but permanently. And so he tried so many different things. And of course, the Brahmastan of India, the global capital of Ramraj, is the main such possibility. But so far, we only have 2,000 flying there. So now we need to expand and to have not just one such group, but many such groups in nations around the world. And that is why Utsav and Leander are organizing Taste of Utopia 2.0 to mobilize the world in that direction of permanent square root of 1%, creating coherence group to bring about perpetual peace and global invincibility. After the Taste of Utopia, and especially between then and the next big assembly, which was in the summer of '84, with 5,500 yogic flyers, it's been recorded in the research that the relationship between the US and the Soviet Union changed completely. There was a complete shift that culminated a few years later in the end of the Cold War, which had threatened the very existence of the human race. So this was a hugely significant thing to make such groups permanent in the world. so that nobody in the world need to fear any more war or pandemics or suffering of any kind, and that Brahm itself, the totality of the intelligence of nature that runs the universe, will support the life of every nation, every government, and every individual citizen to effortlessly fulfill all their desires and live in bliss, live in enlightenment. So this was Taste of Utopia 1.0. Now let's move on to Taste of Utopia 2.0. Jai Gurudev.